The world of Nirn is an insanely diverse place, from mountains to deserts to rainforests to whatever this is. There's just so much insane stuff to see, so much to look at and so much to explore, and with it being around the time where people are starting to get hyped up for the next Elder Scrolls release, or at least the next potential Elder Scrolls release, as you can imagine, a lot of people are imagining where the next game could be set, and even speculating their own theories about it. And I decided that since we don't have any news currently, and since we have basically nothing to go on, what I wanted to do was make a series talking about all the potential places the game could be set, the pros and cons of each, and stuff like that. And that's what this is. So this is going to be a bit of a series where I'm going to go through all the various places where the game could potentially be set, or at least where I think it could be set. I'm going to be giving a bit of an idea of what the place is about, the pros and cons, and then a bit of a summary. Now I'm going to be leaving out Morrowind, Tamriel, and Skyrim because although a remake or a game was set in the same place as those is not necessarily entirely out of the question, I feel like as far as those games stand, they're recent enough that most of the community who is into this sort of stuff has probably played them, and a lot of the time the community seems to have a lot of similar ideas on those things. And beyond that, I just think if I spent a video talking about the pros and cons of the game being set in Skyrim, it just wouldn't be particularly entertaining, and a similar idea for Tamriel and Morrowind. So I'm going to be talking about these games on the screen now. I'm going to be talking about Hammerfell, Valenwood, Elsweyr, Summerset Isles, High Rock, Black Marsh, and then of course I have already spoken a bit about Cochise, so I'm going to be leaving that one out too. If you're interested in watching that, then check out the link in the description or the annotation on screen now. But today we are going to be covering the desertous, forestous rainland of Elsweyr, so that was a description which was off the top of my head in case you couldn't already tell. So without any further ado, I present to you Elsweyr. So first of all, what and where actually is Elsweyr? Well, Elsweyr is wedged right between Valenwood and the Black Marsh, and it's just below Tamriel. Geographically, the land of Elsweyr is pretty well split between deserty land to the north and rainforesty land to the south, with a nice wide coast linking to the sea as well. So the province is essentially split into two main nations, the north and the south. The north is called Anakina, and this is the Badlands, deserty area where a lot of the sort of nomads and those sort of people live, the tribesmen, and the south is called Palatine. This is more of a dense jungle woodland type area, more like Valenwood, with a lot more, forestry and plants and that sort of stuff. And running along the south of it is the coast attached to the Topal Sea. So Elsweyr is the land of the Cochise. It is run by the Cochise, and this is where they come from when you see them in other games. So essentially, as far as the land goes, it's run by this guy called the Main, and he's basically like the Pope. He oversees the land, he's in charge of it, and the Cochise believe that there is not necessarily different people that are Main, but the Main is actually the same person, and he is born into different bodies. Basically, there can only be one Main at a time, and he is just essentially in charge of it. So just some brief history, during the Third Era, the province did actually go through a massive war by the Blades, who essentially went in and tried to kill the Cochise population and take over the land and build the halls of Colossus. However, the tribesmen of the northern area did manage to fight back and take the land back, and are now widely regarded Nirn-wide for this act. The Cochise do still believe in the 9 divines, they just believe in the story a slightly different way. Now I'm not going to go too deep into the lore, as that is something I plan on covering a lot more in the future, lore-wise with Elder Scrolls. However, I will say that they do still believe in that of Stendarr, Mara, Akatosh, Kinnereth, and all that sort of stuff. They also are known to not only believe in, but even in times worship, the Aedra and the Daedra. Another thing the province is well known for is its skooma and moon sugar plantations. Essentially, moon sugar is this drug which a lot of Cochise use, but also is spread Nirn-wide. For the most part, it's very illegal, so it is basically made in here illegally, and then it'll be smuggled across the seas on ships. So moon sugar is what's grown, or made, I guess you could say, in the plantations. However, it can also be processed and turned into skooma, which is the more widely used drug. For the most part, the Cochise will tend to use the moon sugar, and then skooma is what's more sent out Nirn-wide and is used sort of publicly and commercially, I guess you should say, even though it is super illegal. So these hallucinogenic drug plantations are owned and run by these aristocrats, so these noblemen, sometimes noble Cochise, but also people from outside of the province, which have come in to run these drug plantations and make money. So they've got the tribesmen up in the north, living in these badland areas, doing a lot of trading and all that sort of stuff, and as you come more to the centre of the world, you've got these plantations run by these aristocrats. As far as life goes, as I touched upon previously, this is a nice little segue here. As I said, there are the tribesmen tribespeople living in the north area, doing a lot of trading. Then as you go further down, you come to the plantations where the noblemen live and the aristocrats with all their money and stuff. And as you move further south, you've got more sort of the regular native Cochise just living in the rainforest and that sort of area. However, there is actually noted in the Treatise of Lycanthropy, which is a book in the previous games, amongst the lore, there's actually not necessarily a race, but a group of cursed Cochise called were-lions, who do inhabit Elsweyr, as well as Black Marsh and Southern Cyrodiil. That was a quote taken directly from the wiki, by the way, please don't sue me. So yeah, there are these were-lions that live there, and we'll touch more upon those later when we talk about pros and cons and quest possibilities. So going into more detail about the pros as to why this would be a great place to be set, well, personally for me, I think this is an awesome place for exploration. Now, as I said earlier, it's very diverse. You've got a huge, expansive, deserty area, which isn't just plain and flat, it has a ton of ruins to explore, and then as you go further down, you've got the plantation area, as I've already said, and then you've got this completely different change of pace with the rainforest, which also still has ruins and a ton of places to explore. So not only is it very diverse in itself, but it's actually very nice looking, as you can see probably from the pictures I've been showing over the course of this. But also what makes it interesting is that we haven't actually seen this beyond Arena and online. Now, as you guys know, Arena was randomly generated, procedurally generated, so it wasn't necessarily had a huge amount of detail, and it was obviously back in the day, so it was, you know, not necessarily as detailed as it is nowadays. And similarly with Elder Scrolls Online, they didn't go into massive detail with absolutely everything in that game. A lot of it was more sort of bare minimum, so that it'd look nice but not be hugely detailed. So we haven't really had a full chance to properly explore this game in the past, which means that if the game was set here for Elder Scrolls 6, it would be, for the most part, a quite fresh, quite new opportunity. Especially as far as the mainstream set of games goes, obviously Elder Scrolls Online not included in that, we haven't really properly been there. I also think that there's plenty of quest opportunity. So with some places, as we'll come to see later on in the series, it'd have to be sort of forced to try and get ideas in there. And as I mentioned in the Akavir video, if you have seen that, or if you haven't, I'll just sum it up in that there isn't really a lot going on there, so if they did want to set it there, they'd have to sort of force some sort of story. But here they do already have the 9 Divines, they have the Aedra and the Daedra, and they also have these were-lions, which I'll come back to, so there is already some basis for a story. Also, they have this idea of the main, which I don't know how they'd write that into it, but it's unique. Obviously, it's not something they come into. The main is unique to the Elsweyr land, as he does oversee the land and oversee the Khajiit races. So this is not something we've seen in an Elder Scrolls game before, so they could do something with that. I don't really know what, but it is a chance for them to do something new there at the very least. Okay, next, there is also already plenty of opportunity for factions. It is actually mentioned in Cicero's journal that there was a Dark Brotherhood guild in Elsweyr, but it got destroyed by its residents, and then they all moved to Cheydinhal. So essentially, there was back in the day a Dark Brotherhood guild there, but all the residents moved to Cheydinhal, they aren't there anymore, which means that there is a possibility that they could go back there, rebuild it. So just from that, there's already Dark Brotherhood potential. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is also these were-lions, and I think this is an awesome opportunity for a new guild, a new faction, maybe even just a new little cult of were-lion hunters. They've been described as a vile presence in Elsweyr, so these aren't something which are loved. In fact, they're actually maybe even seen down upon, sort of like witches back in the olden days in England, and that sort of stuff, or I guess America as well. I don't really know much about history, let's be honest. But yeah, so these were-lions are hanging about. Maybe this could be another quest line. This could easily be sort of, you could go down the road of being a were-lion and maybe fighting for them, or alternatively you could fight against them. Maybe this could be blown out into like a big story thing of were-lions versus non-were-lions, and it becomes a big fight to try and get rid of them as they become more powerful. Or alternatively, it could just be a little thing, sort of like the Vigilants of Stendarr, who go around like, oh yeah, we hunt Daedra. It could just be a little thing like that with this extra faction who hunt the were-lions. It could go either way, but the possibility is there. As far as majory goes and fighting guild and all that sort of stuff, that would have to be written in somehow, but I'll leave that up to Bethesda. Now, as far as cons go, this is basically just arguing everything that I've previously said. I don't have any specific cons which stand out by themselves, but what I will say is that, as I did mention earlier, and I know I've said that a few times this episode, so sorry about that, but I did say that this is mainly Khajiit run. There are some noblemen of other races. Having said that, there isn't a ton of other races going on, so Bethesda would have to come up with some way of getting the other races in there, so it's not just Khajiit. Now, I don't know if this would mess with the law, or if it would just seem forced, so they'd have to have some sort of way where, unless they said it in the future and made up some new law as to why there was other races there, this is a Khajiit land, it's run by the Khajiit. the guy who runs the entire province is Khajiit, so they'd have to somehow make it so that it wasn't just that race, that there were other races in there, and that could be seen as a con. Another thing is, I know this is great for diversity, having the deserts in the north and the forest in the south, but to me personally, I don't know, it would just seem a bit random having this vast, expansive deserty land, which is great to explore, and then all of a sudden there's this forest. It'd seem a little bit conflicting, so they'd have to have some sort of way for me to sort of merge those together. Now, I don't think this is necessarily a con, because, you know, they could do a great job of it, but this is just something they'd have to keep an eye out for. Another thing to bear in mind is that, coming back to a previous point, there isn't actually any Fighters Guild or Mages Guild there. Now, I know as far as the main quest goes, that shouldn't really affect it, but from my Elder Scrolls 6 wishlist video, I could see that a lot of people seem to be wanting either more guilds or fleshed out quest lines from the pre-existing guilds, or maybe even a bit of both, and this isn't a great starting point for that, in that they basically don't have any guilds. Now, I know I mentioned earlier the chance of the Dark Brotherhood being set up there, as they were there in the past, but if they did move away, it was probably for a reason, to be fair. So this could be a downfall. A lot of people seem to want the guilds expanded on and just generally improved. So the fact that there aren't actually any there currently could be a big downfall for the game. But again, it depends how Bethesda does it. My only thing is, similarly with the races in there, if they have to try and force the Fighters Guild in there or the Mages Guild just for the sake of having them, it won't really work out unless they do a great job of it, making it seem natural, or changing the lore around slightly, which may not set well with some people. But, you know, it really depends on how they do it. I just will say that a lot of people want better guilds, more guilds, fleshed out guilds, and having no guilds there to start off with isn't a great starting point. But honestly, as far as pros and cons goes, that's pretty much it. So in summary, I think it'd be awesome to explore. We've not been there before properly. It looks like a great place to explore. There's a lot going on there. It has a pretty rich history, some new stuff which we haven't seen before. Obviously, I mentioned the moon sugar plantations. There's the whole main system with the ruler. So there's some stuff which we haven't actually seen before in the Elder Scrolls games, which could be pretty interesting. It gives Bethesda a great opportunity to try out new stuff, so that's a great thing, but there are some limits which they'd have to shift around to try and make it work. But for the most part, I don't see why, if they don't do a good job of that, shifting things around and fitting things in, I don't see why it wouldn't be a great game. So yeah, I want to say thank you for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, a like would really help the channel out and the series out now that it's getting off the ground. But yeah, that is going to do it for this video. If you did enjoy, a like would really help the channel out and the series out specifically, especially with it in its infancy. Now, I'm sorry this was all over the place. For the next episode, I'm going to try and script a bit more as opposed to just, you know, going off some vague notes. But let me know what you did think. So I'm sorry if the structure was all over the place, if it was a bit shit. But I will say thank you for watching, and if you have anything to say, i.e. your own pros or cons or your own opinions on it being set in Elsweyr, then let me know in the comment below. I will be reading everyone, even if I don't necessarily reply to them straight away, which I'm quite shitty for that, but I'm going to be trying to get on that from here on out. But yeah, thank you for watching, guys. If you haven't already done so and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe, check out my video on Akavir, and I will see you guys next time. Peace, guys.